Tonight I wanted us to try thinking about Torah in a different way. I want us to think about it not as something we've inherited from the past necessarily, and not as something that dropped out of the sky. I want us to think about the Torah as a book of wisdom. And I have two reasons to want to do that. The first, which Jews overlook, is that the Torah itself, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, good. The Torah itself asks to be treated as a book of Chokhmah, a book of wisdom. In Devarim, in the book of Deuteronomy, we are told that the nations of the world will watch how we behave, and based on looking at our behavior, they will say, "What a wise people, and what a great God." I want us for a moment to take that seriously and to ask, what would Judaism look like if we were conscious of the fact that we need to look wise in the eyes of non-Jews? What would we do differently? How would we behave differently? What would become important and what would be unimportant? What would be trivial in our eyes if that were the standard? You know, it's a running joke I tell my students that when a Christian tells you, "I'm very religious," they mean they pray all the time. And when a Jew tells you they're very religious, it's right before they explain why they're not willing to eat in your house. That's not Judaism as wisdom. That's Judaism as obligation. I want us to move away from that. I want us to think about what wisdom does this collection have that can enhance our lives and make our lives better. And I want to do that for a second reason. Not only does the Torah suggest that we need to reorient ourselves in that way, but the world has moved on. How many of your children and grandchildren believe that there's a God in the sky who wrote a book and we have to follow the details of that book or we're going to get in trouble? Right? That's the hands I expected to see. Maybe one, maybe two. How old are they?
31.
Oh, so you're going good. The vast majority of young people today, which means 55 and under, next April 3rd will be 56 and under. And my guess is most of you don't believe that either. Now, it inspires careful attention to the Torah if you think that there's someone in the sky who wrote the words of the book and who's watching to make sure you follow them. And kol hakavod to those Jews who believe it. It helps them live a better life. I'm all in favor of whatever gets you through the day. But we don't have access to that. And so if that's the only reason to live a life of Torah, we're finished. We're finished. But it's not. So I want to group the Torah's wisdom in the following clusters. I think that we all have a profound need to live lives of meaning larger than our own existence. Let me say that again. To be human is to want to touch the world in a way that it's different because you were here. I think we all have that need. So one of the ways that that happens is we tell a story that's bigger than our own lives. And we identify so completely with that story that we ourselves become bigger than our own lives. To be a Jew means that your narrative does not start on the day you were born. It doesn't start on the day your parents met each other. Your narrative starts with Abraham and Sarah and the courage to wander out of their home into a place that they didn't know where. And because of that, we've been wandering ever since. But your story includes going down to Egypt, living a life of oppressed slaves, and then being brought out in extraordinary ways. Your story involves knowing that there was a land that you were promised, and that your journey involves somehow returning to that holy land. And your journey continues beyond that to encompass all the generations of the Jewish people. Which means that for a moment, the brief spectacle of our own biological existence is contained in an ocean that extends way, way, way before we were born and will continue, God willing, long after we die. And here's what that changes. It means then that the purpose of our life does not have to be fulfilled during our lifetime. Right? I used to think about your dad, who would come up and lead services for us at the end of what is apparently not your favorite holiday. And I'm not offended. Other rabbis would be, but I rise above this. So if you haven't hurt my feelings at all, don't even think of apologizing, really. Really. And I would think about the nachas of a man getting up to lead the services at the end of Yom Kippur, looking out at his son and his son's children, and what he was tasting was eternity, which is more filling than the break the fast meal could possibly be. He was tasting eternity, but he wasn't just tasting it for himself. He was thinking of his parents, and that they were looking at the same eternity through his eyes. But we're all in that position, aren't we, as Jews? We, all of us, see history as a broad sweep in which our stories contribute their little part. But if we all contribute our little part, then we are guaranteed to be part of something that will continue to change the world. So when we read the Torah, I know you do that regularly here. When you read the Torah, the right question to ask is not, do I think this really happened? That turns it into a book of old stories. The question is it happening right now? Are you a son of Abraham, a daughter of Abraham, a son of Jacob, a daughter of Rebekah? Are they living through you so that when you read their story, it's a way of unfolding your own? I don't know about you, but when I teach stories of Torah, I teach that Moses is us, and Pharaoh is us. And that if we're honest in reading that book, we have to ask, what am I doing to be Moses for my generation? In whose life am I a Pharaoh right now, and what do I need to change so that I'm not oppressing someone else? Those stories are the projected image of our own drama put out in the world. I'll share with you another. None of us knows what tomorrow will bring into our lives. None of us. We don't even know what's going to be 5 minutes from now. Doesn't that mean that when you read about Abraham being told, Lech Lecha, get up and go to a place that I haven't shown you yet, that's your story. We're all doing that. We're all on this journey without knowing the destination. And if we read the Torah at that level, then it's not a question of do you believe this or not. The question is, are you living your life through these stories? Many of you have met my son Jacob. who is a 22-year-old struggling with autism. He gave a talk to the men's club right here last year. Jacob will often say to me, by typing, "Abba, I need to be Moses." He especially likes Moses. First of all, it's not such a bad role. No offense to David. But he also likes Moses because Moses had a hard time speaking. So he identifies that you can do great things in the world without speaking. Right? And he thinks he knows how to read Torah. The question isn't, was there really a guy named Moses, and did he really talk to a guy named Pharaoh? Who cares? There's really a Moses right now today in each of us. What Pharaoh is holding you back? What Pharaoh is preventing you from standing up and marching your people to freedom? Your job is to stand in the presence of that Pharaoh and say, "We're leaving." We all have to live those stories. So one cluster in which the Torah is a guide to good life is the powerful narrative, the incredible stories that it tells us. These are stories that can be trivialized into fairy tales. But that's not where they're true. They're true because they continue to inspire human beings to strive for greatness, to transform the world, to be able to live with greater purpose and greater meaning. These stories are extraordinary. They have never been equaled. Second way that the Torah continues to inspire better life is it has surely come to your attention that the Torah is not just a book of stories. It also contains an extensive section of rules. You shall do this, you shall not do that. I like to think of the Torah not as a law book. My wife is a federal prosecutor, right? And thank you for asking, business is very good. It's one of the nice things about working in the area of federal crime. There's no shortage of new business being generated every day. So part of what makes a law book is that you have some sweet, dainty little Rebbitzin like my wife who will arrange through a judge for you to serve enormous amounts of time in a penitentiary. The Torah doesn't have that. It has ceased as a law book a long time ago. You know as well as I do that whatever your theology, you have to choose to be a Torah Jew. No matter how orthodox you want to be, it's still a choice. In that regard, we're all Reformed. Right? Every single one of us has to decide to be committed to Torah and to Jewish law. Why would we do that? Because it turns out that the way life advances is not simply by doing whatever we want whenever we want. Life advances by how do you make good choices when there are restricted options. That's what enables a business to thrive. Good choices in restricted options. That's what allows a politician to mobilize his country. I'm watching a series about a very unpopular president. This will sound immediately familiar to you, right? He ran a hotly contested election. The previous president had been very unpopular. The country was divided 50-50, and there was no real interactive conversation going on. People were just caricaturing each other. He was accused of being an ignoramus. He was accused of being a socialist. He was accused of being an imperial president who imposed his will through edicts rather than going through the legislative body. Of course, I'm talking about Abe Lincoln. right, whose Emancipation Proclamation was widely despised in his lifetime. Our greatest president, I think we can safely agree in a nonpartisan way, was Abe Lincoln. So let me tell you what Abe Lincoln did with the Bible. The greatest speech ever delivered by any president of the United States was Abe Lincoln's second inaugural. It's the only speech that from start to finish is carved on the wall of a building. And it, I think, rather than his Gettysburg Address, which I will say is his second best speech, is the greatest speech of all time. Lincoln stood in front of the nation. The North finally knew they were about to win the Civil War. It had taken 4 long years. More Americans died in that war than in any other war in our country's history. It was the most brutal war of any war up to its time, and it set the stage for World War I and World War II. Unspeakable savagery, immense loss of life. Lincoln got up and he preached Torah to the nation. He said, when this war started, we all expected the war to take a couple months, which is true. North and South, everyone thought it would be done in a few months. Instead, he noted, it has taken us 4 years, with more loss of life and property than anyone had expected. And this is because the ways of the Lord are righteous altogether. Can you imagine a president speaking like that today? And the wages of sin will be paid. And slavery, he said, was such a sinful violation of human dignity that the Lord was not willing for this country to have a penny of profit from the slave system, and therefore the war dragged on until not a penny of profit remained. And then he sat down, after concluding by saying, with malice towards none, and with charity towards all. That's a man who knew his Bible. That's a man who knew that those rules are not there for a ritual purpose. They're there to help us understand the world we live in and to live a better life. The endless cycles of revenge between the former Confederate states and the former Union states, a cycle, by the way, unbroken in our own time, is because we failed to heed Lincoln's religious advice. Fight the war to win, and then win the peace by extending total forgiveness. So what if we lived our lives not simply to feed our bellies, not simply to try to stave off fears of our own mortality? What if we lived our lives to bring holiness into the world? To be able to show God's compassionate face on our faces. To show God's loving hands through our behavior. A community that has Shabbat at its core is a community that's inviting people into your home all the time. A community where nobody stays a stranger for long, because sooner or later you're going to eat with everybody. Wouldn't that be a nice community to live in? Some of you know that one of my great privileges as the dean of the rabbinical school at AJU, I had the pleasure of ordaining Rabbi Gershom Sizomo, who is the rabbi in Uganda of the Abba Yudaya tribe. We went there to install him as rabbi, and they had a celebration at his installation. 1,200 people showed up.
Wow.
They asked if I would be willing to pay for the feast. I asked how much does it cost in East Africa to feed 1,200 people a feast. They said about $300. I'm a big shot, I can do that. But what amazed me in Uganda was that the wisdom of Torah has created a people who are desperately poor and limitlessly generous. They don't own a lot of things, but whatever they own, they share. And we have forgotten that, which, by the way, the Bible anticipated. Right? The Torah says that when you grow rich, you will start to forget the source of your wealth. And you will start to claim credit for your own bounty. I think that's all over this country. In Uganda, where they're impoverished, they're deeply wealthy. Because wealth is contentment, wealth is generosity, wealth is a bountiful spirit. If you don't have those three things, I don't care how much money you have in your account. You're not rich. So the second great wisdom of the Torah is it establishes rules by which we can fake the wisdom we don't yet feel. You give to charity whether you're in the mood or not. You restrain your dietary patterns whether you're in the mood or not. You treat your spouse with love and honor, whether you're feeling it or not. Because at some point the feeling will come back, and if you haven't behaved the right way, the spouse won't be there for you to show that love. The Torah is a guidebook for broken, struggling people. And we are all of us broken, struggling people. Okay, so stories that project the struggles of our soul out into the world. Guidelines of practice that hold us together as a people, that make us a people across the globe with shared values and shared priorities, and allow us to train ourselves, to school ourselves in that practice every day. And the third thing the Torah embodies, without which I believe no people can survive, is hope. The Torah really is the book of hope, in which no matter how we are beaten down, we affirm faith in three things. First is, sorry to hear about yours, but my God always strikes down pharaohs. Not always as quickly as I would like, but always. So, woe to the commissars, and woe to the Führers, and woe to the Ayatollahs. Yes. Those, you meant that to all three, right? Freedom has always spoken with a Hebrew accent, and it always will. So the transformation of the world is based on the translation of justice into hope. And the Torah is a book of hope. And the Torah is a book of love. A God who didn't need the world for anything creates a world in order to have something upon which love can be given. And you are made in God's image, which means you also need to find something to love, or you start to shrivel up. It's true, people do. And the third, hope and love. The third is charity. But charity not as, I have everything, you have nothing, I'm going to give you something because you're pathetic. Charity in the overwhelming feeling, I'm human and you're human, and so what we have in common is more than what divides us. And therefore your need becomes my concern. The most frequently repeated command in the Torah is you shall not oppress the stranger, more than any other commandment. That's not to say that the other commandments aren't important too. Some of them are only mentioned one. They're very important. Honor your parents, for example. Very important. But the number of times God and Moses repeat, you shall not oppress the stranger. You shall love the stranger. You shall have one law for you and for the stranger who dwells in your midst. Again and again and again. The Torah is a book of justice, of dignity. Can you live your life without hope and love and dignity? I can't. I can't. So I want to start with a running jump, and then I'm going to finish. Even if tomorrow I woke up thinking there is no God, I would still pray the Shacharit prayers. I would still keep kosher. I would still be part of the Jewish community. Because wisdom isn't based on who said it. Wisdom is based on what can it bring to your life. The reason to observe the Torah is not because God said it. In fact, I want to turn that around. The reason I'm willing to stand here and say the Torah comes from God is because it's so wise. But paradoxically, because it's so wise, it doesn't matter whether God said it or not. Let's imagine it was our ancestors who thought it up. That doesn't change the wisdom. You're still Moses, fighting for freedom. You're still Abraham, trying to find your way where no one will tell you what the destination is. You're still looking to bring hope and justice into people's lives. I don't know any book that has stood the test of time the way the Torah has. The Torah has been so inspirational that it has spawned two wildly successful religions. I wish we could figure out what it is they did, because we still are, in the small numbers, and they seem to be marching over the world. But they quote our scriptures as the core of their own. That's true for Islam as it is true for Christianity. And even the secularists end up quoting principles that they get from our Torah. You want to talk about what inspired the labor movement? You want to talk about who thought up giving people a day off from their work, or paying them decent wages, or paying it on time? The labor movement got that from our Torah. The civil rights movement marched an entire outcast population into the center of American life by telling the story of our Exodus. And that makes me happy. I don't want to hold on to our story. I want everyone to hear themselves in it. And I want everyone to be able to acknowledge its wisdom and allow that wisdom to flow out into the world. And that's why I came here tonight. I came here tonight, first of all, because I knew that Abner and Roz would be here, and I never miss a chance to see Abner and Roz. I came here, second of all, because I love Sinai Temple, and I wanted to just say, yes, anytime Sinai Temple asks me to do anything, don't abuse that. And third, I want to remind you that you are the heirs to one of the great wisdom traditions of all time. And I think in some ways the challenge of being Jewish is we've had it for so long, we forget how extraordinary it is. So if tonight I gave you just a moment to remember how incredibly blessed we are to possess that book, to hug that book, to kiss that book, and to live that book, that's what I came to share with you tonight. Thank you very much.